amongst it, get on it now. Get amongst it, get on out there, get on it, get amongst it, get on it now. Get amongst it, get on out there, get on it, get amongst it, get on it now. Get amongst it, get on out there, get on it, get amongst it, get on it now. Get amongst it, get on out there, get on it, get amongst it, get on it now. Get amongst it, get on out there.
belongs to a creature from outer space. Belongs to a creature from outer space. It belongs to a creature from outer space. Belongs to a creature from outer space.
Yeah, I was schlepping magazines. I'm too old to do that. Move these 100-pound boxes of magazines into arenas. I'm just way too old to do that. And I did it. And they told me it's a. They told me it was an infected bursa sac that had ruptured, and so now I'm on these really really strong antibiotics, and the one of the side effects is hallucinations. So if I start asking guests about Spider-Man and the multiverse tonight, you have my permission to cut me off. It was Troy Murray. He was the captain of that team. Your friend and mine, Troy Murray, the voice of the Chicago Blackhawks and a star at the University of North Dakota. A couple of UND players on that team. James Patrick was on that club. It was a really nice hockey team with some really tremendous people that remained in hockey for a long, long time. The Sutters, the James Patrick, who's still coaching in Winnipeg today with the Ice, the best junior team in Canada. Mark Morrison, who's still coaching. There was all sorts of players on that team that are still in the game today, still around the game today, and it was just really a pleasure to deal with them. And of course, the championship game was in Rochester, Minnesota, in this little rink that looked like a curling rink, and the press box was at an end. And so here's my story from that game. I'm sitting beside a guy from Canadian Press, and he says to me and my friends are starting a business. It's a board game, and if you want to get in, the share's $5,000. Well, in 1982, I didn't have $5,000, but it sounded really interesting. He said, we're going to Spain next week to write the questions for this board game. And it turned out to be Trivial Pursuit. So for the lack of $5,000, I'm doing this show with you tonight, not living on some island in the Caribbean. Yes, it has. Yes, yes. He's back. Yep. No, absolutely, and make the best of every opportunity you get, and find $5,000 to invest in Trivial Pursuit.
Well, I haven't had that opportunity. That's too bad. I wish I could. I'm kind of right in that stage right now too. I don't know how if I have $5,000 to give though.
I have to ask you a question about some things we've been reading about in the last couple of weeks. The number of Pilot Mound Hockey Academy Buffaloes that are playing for the OCN Blizzard in the Manitoba Junior Hockey League. That's an amazing story. 6 of players that you coached or
Yeah.
have hung out with or were around.
Yeah.
Tell us that story of those 6 players.
Yeah, we've just a lot of the kids from up north. It was probably our second year that we started. We started to get the kids coming down out of Norman. Their AAA program wasn't as strong, and some just wanted to try the academy too. It wasn't all about the program in Norman, but yeah, they started coming down, and then we got a few out of Interlake, and as it went, they've developed, and OCN drafted some of them, listed some of them, and it's kind of evolved that it's kind of the team that a lot of our players have ended up with. And we have another one playing with us right now that's also on their list, or maybe a couple actually. So it's been a good group to work with. They're very supportive of our program. I know they come down and they like to see the kids getting down here in school, following the routine and getting into school regularly, being on the ice every day. And playing in Norman is not always easy. They have so much travel. Not that we don't have travel, but being in the academy, if you can afford it, it's a good program for them. So yeah, we've worked well with OCN, and like we do all the other teams. It's kind of neat to see all those kids on there, and they've all contacted me a little bit and sent pictures and that, and I keep in touch with most of them, and it's really nice to see. And it sounds like they're all doing quite well up there too, and that's our goal, is to move these kids on, and they've done well up there. Oh, absolutely. We got kids from, this year we got a kid from Belgium. We've had them from Finland, Czechoslovakia. We've just brought a boy in about a month ago from Niverville, but he's a Russian boy. So we've got all kinds, several Americans and Canadians, and then our kids from up north. And it's really good to bring them all together, see how everybody's come from different backgrounds, different hockey backgrounds, and to bring them all together and meld them into one big hockey team, and well, actually our whole academy, because all the teams have kids from all over. So it's kind of neat. It's neat for me as a coach to get to know these kids and see all the backgrounds, and you spend a lot of time with them, so you spend a lot of time talking, and I like talking to them all. But my kids from Nunavut and that, it's interesting to sit down and talk to those kids of, like, they just don't get to sit down and have a piece of whale meat in Palamel, Manitoba, but they do get food sent down to them and stuff. So it's kind of neat. Some of them brought some to school for the kids to try, and teachers, and I didn't try it because I just couldn't do it, but it's kind of neat. I really enjoy all aspects of all these kids coming in, and for the most part, they all kind of get along as we go, and it's really neat. It's a really neat aspect of the whole program.
Well, it's getting on to Christmas time. You've seen your team for 3 months now. What are your thoughts? What do you think of this club?
Well, we're a work in progress. We started slow, which talked about earlier. I got a whole new team, but as we go, we're building chemistry. We fought through some injuries here lately, but last weekend in Calgary, we had a pretty good weekend, going 2-2, and I'll say upset Edge. They're one of the top teams in the league. Our last game, the kids came out and really played an excellent hockey game. So I'm quite pleased with the progression we've made. I'm really hard on them. I'm pushing them, but I see success. I see a lot of kids developing their games, developing as people, becoming more confident, and now they've been here long enough. They know what I'm all about. They know what the program's all about. So no, I'm quite pleased. We still got lots of work to do, but ending the way we did last weekend with a huge win, we talked, and now I know we kind of set a standard for the next. We come back after Christmas, and my goals will elevate again. And it doesn't matter where we are in the standing. I'm still pushing to win a championship, and I will push these kids every day to keep working at it. And they've bought in. It's a good group, and I'm quite pleased.
When you say bought in, when you say bought in, what are they buying into entirely? The culture in Pilot Mound, your style, the amount of work it takes to become a better player. Explain to me what that looks like to you.
You know, a little bit of everything. First of all, getting to know me, my style of coaching, my expectations, but also just to fitting into the academy situation, learning to go to school, being on time, being at school every day, coming to practice, getting to dryland, getting home to eat on time, you know, the study hall at night, traveling. We spend so much traveling. My systems, the way we're going to play. There's a lot of things to come in and just building chemistry. But my main thing is to buy into being a good person. I expect discipline. I'm proud of our academy, and I expect my kids to buy into being good kids as well as good hockey players. So a little bit of everything, but the hockey aspect, you know, it's buying into the way I coach. I'm not always the easiest guy out there, but I think if you ask my kids, we get along very well. They respect me, I respect them, and I think we're going in the right direction. So that's why I say I'm pretty pleased with the way we've gone. Yes, absolutely. Some of the kids come in, they haven't really attended school regularly. Um, Class situations going from some are in huge classes to our classes that are around 20 to 25, depending. Um, Living in the dorm life is a big change for a lot of them. You know, they're away from home. They got to their meals are cooked, but they got to wash their clothes. They got to look after themselves. So it is an adjustment for a lot of things. Not having mom and dad there at night to coddle them. We do have a dorm mom and stuff, but you know, to get them to do their homework regularly at night, that is always a challenge. And without mom and dad there to do it, we have to do it. But I have standards as well. That's part of my program too. You don't keep your marks up, you don't play, you don't practice, kind of thing. So the kids, for the most part, work at all that. So there is a lot of adjustments moving down here to the small town too. You know, some of the kids come and they're looking for the Subway and McDonald's. Well, they're not going to find that in Pilot Mountain. And we do have some nice little restaurants find you, but it's quite an adjustment. But from my experience in my 7 years here with the kids all buy in, and that, you know, once we get them here, most of them quite enjoy the small town living, the comfort of our town, and because everybody knows them, you know, from little kids to grandparents. So I think it's a pretty good situation. Yes. Hey, thanks a lot, guys. Same to you guys. Merry Christmas. And yeah, anyone down there that wants to join us, we'll take anybody on.
Thanks, Rick. Merry Christmas.
Thanks, guys. Merry Christmas.
Oh, it's a tremendous choice, and it's a place where all of the coaches care as much as Rick does. But as he points out, you live amongst your teammates. It's kind of your first step toward playing college hockey. If you want to be a college hockey player, that's the place to go. That's the place to get a start because you're not billeting, you're living in a dorm, and it's no different than living in the dorms at UND. Tell me about this U.S. team. How good are they?
I'll tell you what. I think that when you look at Team USA this year, Bordalo not being there kind of hurts them a little bit, but I do think it's a team that's really going to be able to get up and go. I like the defense core. I think down the middle, they're pretty stable. I think on the left side, they're pretty stable. And I think they're trying to fill in some pieces. But the returners obviously going to have to play a big role. The goaltending we just mentioned, it's the first time, and I say this with respect to Comesso, it's the first time that I've gone into a World Junior tournament not knowing a ton about the goaltending. I think it's the first time that we've gone in without a name that's kind of a household name in the USA Goalie Nation community. But I also think that's a great opportunity for this kid to really shine. I know his first half of the season at BU has been a little up and down, but I do think that when you get into this tournament, remember, it's only 7 games, it's not 40. And as we've learned in a Stanley Cup final, in a first round series, you get hot at the right time, you put it together at the right time, you play behind some familiar faces again that you've been with in the past, then this is going to be a potentially pretty good thing. And keep in mind that 2002 birth year team when they played U18, that wasn't a real big scoring team, and he was the guy that really had to hold them together, and he did. So he has demonstrated at least a track record of playing behind a team that might struggle to score and being able to keep games from falling apart on him.
Who do you see as the U.S.'s toughest competition? Because the one thing about the World Junior lately is all the teams are pretty good.
I'll tell you what, it's every year you go into this and you say to yourself, let's try to be out of the division of death. And the division of death to me is always the division where 3 of the big 5 are in it. And this year the U.S. are in that kind of division with the Russians and the Swedes. And I think what's interesting is with the Russians, like you just never know. And believe it or not, I'd rather get the Russians later in the pool play than early, because early on they're all full of jump and spunk and nobody knows quite what to make of them. And as they go through the tournament, you get a little bit of a read on them. And you can say this about anybody, but with the Russians, I think once you get a read on them, they get a little bit easier to play against, more so than maybe some of the other teams. And last year, if you remember, in game 1 against the U.S., they came out and they look like the Soviet teams in the 1980s. I mean, the puck possession, the circling back, the perfect play, soccer on ice, and it was great to watch. And I think everybody figured it out as it went along, and it wasn't sustainable. So I think I'd like to get the Russians later. Their first 2 games with the Swiss and the Slovaks, to me, I think those are 2 games that they win. And hopefully they get pushed a little bit during those games, but they can get some traction and find their game. Then they get the Russians and the Swedes, and remember, the Swedes haven't lost the game in the preliminary round since, the Eisenhower era. So I think that could be your one hiccup, or that could be the one game on New Year's Eve where or not New Year's Eve, but one game as you move through the tournament where you get really jacked up and you say to yourself, you know what, that could be the fun game, because there's a hurdle that they haven't climbed in a while. I mean, Team USA has done a lot at the World Juniors. They haven't beat the Swedes in pool play, despite that great Ryan Pelling game of a couple of years back in Victoria where he scored 3 late to get it into overtime.
If I'm watching the U.S. team for the first time, which I will be, who do I watch? Who are the players?
That's a good question. I just pulled up the roster in front of me, and I'll tell you what, let's take a look at the back end first. I think Brock Faber surprised a lot of people last year. I think he was looked at more as a depth guy, and he came up and he played a really big role for him. But obviously, you look at the returners and Tyler Clevin and Jake Sanderson from the University of North Dakota, the odd couple there. And boy, are they fun to watch. And I thought Sanderson last year was really, really good. And I thought Clevin played his role. Like, he was perfectly slotted in to be a factor on that back line last year. I think he'll get some more minutes this year and play a little bit more of a bigger role as a returning player. But, he'll bring that physical component. And I think the physical component of the World Juniors tends to get a little overlooked and a little underrated at times. It's a war of attrition out there, and your bigger bodies sometimes are the ones that are really cemented into to carry the load and take some of the burden off some of the other guys. But I think one of the or 2 players I'm going to tell you to keep an eye on. One is Scott Morrow from UMass, who I think is just a dynamic offensive player. He's so cerebral. He's so smart. He generates a lot of offense without needing a whole lot of room to do it. And obviously Luke Hughes. I mean, Luke Hughes is just a bigger version of Quinn in a lot of ways. He's got Quinn's elusiveness. He's got Quinn's cerebral hockey IQ, but he's just a bigger man. So he's somewhere between a couple of other really good Michigan-based defensemen and his brother Quinn and Owen Power. Quinn on the smaller side, Power on the big side. Hughes slots in somewhere in the middle, but he's got a lot of both of their games in the way that he plays. Hockey Canada.
Hockey Canada. I will start by saying that historically there have been a couple per team every year. But to be fair, Hockey Canada is married to the Western Hockey League. They are married to the Canadian Hockey League. They're married to the Ontario League and the Quebec League. There is a relationship between Hockey Canada and our junior leagues that run very, very deep. The reason there's no USHL guys is they're all young. I mean, if Jaden Perron was going to play at 18 in the USHL, which he probably won't be because his numbers are so gigantic in Chicago this year. If he was still there, he would be a USHL player playing on this team in a couple of years. I mean, he will play on this team eventually. But I think it just goes back to the Canadian Hockey League and Hockey Canada have a relationship, and that relationship is very important. And unless you are a superstar in the NCAA, you're not likely to play on this team.
Yeah, I think that's pretty well said. And when I look at the Canadian roster just in general, and we look for the two college kids. Kent Johnson, by the way, is the other one that you're thinking of, also from the University of Michigan. But I mean, this is a roster that is just so overloaded with 2002 birth year players, and obviously a lot of draft picks. And then you get the youngster, the 2005, and Connor Bedard, and it blows my mind. Connor Bedard is a month younger than my son who's playing U16 in New Hampshire right now. I mean, I look at that and I'm just blown away at how good this kid is at such a young age. But you've got some returners there. And Scott, you make a good point. I mean, the Canadian Hockey League and Hockey Canada are embedded together, and every once in a while they'll fill out the roster. I mean, Jonathan Taves did okay, as a North Dakota kid who played for Team Canada. Cale Makar, I think when that tournament when Cale Makar was on the team, I thought that they absolutely had no idea how to use him correctly at all. It was amazing. It reminded me when Henrik Borgstrom from Denver played for the Finns, and I mean, they just had no idea what they had on their hands with him in their lineup, and they barely used him in that 2017 tournament, and that was a tournament where the Finns really crapped out. So I think that the country that has really identified and gone with the U.S. college kids obviously is Team USA, and they've had a ton of success with it. Will there ever be more Canadian-based college kids playing on Team Canada moving forward? If you could talk about some of the older guys, I think when it comes down to that, why not, right? But on the other hand, I do see your point, and that is Hockey Canada and the junior leagues and Team Canada at the World Juniors. I mean, that's just, they go hand in hand like a marriage. So it's hard for those Canadian kids that come south of the border to make that team.
Well, and as we've discussed a number of times, we've discussed this a lot of times on this show, but as the game grows in the United States and more players come from what we would call non-traditional markets, it's no longer just Massachusetts, Michigan, and Minnesota who play hockey now. The game is played everywhere in the United States, and players are getting better from everywhere. And the opportunities for Canadian players to play U.S. college hockey are going to dwindle as the years go along. There aren't going to be that many opportunities as American players get better and better.
I think that's an interesting point. I'm going to give you the other side of it. The other side of it is you're going to see some expansion in U.S. college hockey. I think we're at 60 teams now. Maybe we're at 59. I think 60. And you're probably going to get to about 63 or 65 within the next few years with the teams that we're looking at that could be coming in. So while I tend to agree that I think hockey's getting better in the United States and the U.S. is producing more players, and I've said this many times, we're at the point now with the World Junior program or with the World Junior teams where the U.S. could probably send two teams, and the A team will medal and the B team will challenge. And I think that's a great thing. And, for a lot of years, Hockey Canada would say, hey, listen, if we don't win gold this year, it's because our best U18 or best U20s are playing in the NHL. And now the United States can say that too. And I think that's a huge feather in the cap of the development process that, we've obviously had here south of the border. But I do think for Canadian kids coming south of the border to play U.S. college hockey, I do think that there are going to be some opportunities that will continue to move forward for them as NCAA hockey expands both at the Division I and Division III levels. And plus, there are so many teams that are in border states where across the border, they're known. For example, the University of Vermont and the University of Maine, I've always thought were two schools that probably could have done really well in Quebec and in the Maritimes just because of their proximity to those areas. So, I mean, you get that concept. Obviously, the University of North Dakota has done very well with bringing in some Canadian kids. Michigan, there are 5 or 6 Division I schools in the state of Michigan, and obviously that's right on the border too. And the one state, and here's where I got to smile a little bit, the one state that leads all of college hockey in Division I programs is New York. And a good chunk of their teams are also up by the border, whether it be Colgate, Clarkson, St. Lawrence, Cornell, and then the 3 schools in the greater Buffalo area with RIT, Canisius, and Niagara. So I do think that, wrapping up, Canadian kids will always have that opportunity because they're going to know about what's going on down here. But I also think that with the continued improvement of U.S. players, those spots will be heavily challenged for. I do, and it's funny because I get a lot of phone calls from friends of mine who live either in the Southeast or the Southwest to say that they're at a bar or restaurant and they're watching the game. And the fact that that has happened is great. And here's where I think it changed. I had a good buddy of mine who's actually now doing Spanish radio broadcasts for ESPN. His name is Carlos Rosell, and he used to own a bar on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and it was a big hockey bar. And I remember he texted me right before the 2010 championship game between the U.S. and Canada and Saskatoon to say that not only is the bar packed, but he had to put TVs up outside the bar because there are so many people that want to watch that game. And that's when I realized that the World Junior Tournament as an event in the United States and some of the non-traditional markets, and I still do consider New York City a non-traditional hockey market, I think that that's where it started to really take off. And that gold medal win was huge. And the fact that we've had a lot of success at that tournament, the fact that a lot of players who play in the U.S. on the U.S. teams go through to the NHL, I think has made it a little bit more of a destination event for fans to watch because they want to watch who's coming next. And we all know how big the prospect business is when it comes to media, when it comes to the fans. In the Southeast, who is signing with Georgia or Alabama or LSU? Like, I remember I coached in the South for 5 years. The biggest discussion was signing day. Signing day was like a national holiday in the Southeast. And I think that the whole concept of the prospects and where they're going and getting an early read on them has really helped the World Junior Tournament in the United States grow because it is really that exclusive look at what the future of the NHL could be among American players for your team and just in general for players from around the world, what your team's going to look like potentially in 3 or 4 years.
It belongs to a creature from outer space. belongs to a creature from outer space.
Oh, when I
Chargers are at home.
Yep.
Well, there's lots to talk about tonight, but before we leave the World Junior, tell me about Chaz Lucius, Winnipeg Jets first round draft pick. Folks up here got to know what he's like. They'll certainly be watching him once the tournament starts. Tell us about Lucius.
I was talking to a couple of folks over at the National Team Development Program, and the one thing that they described him as is he's just got a knack to score goals. And the impression I get, because I haven't seen him play a ton, so the impression I get from some of the scouts that I've talked to is he's just really crafty around the net, and he can score from distance. And it's not a shot that blows you away, but it's a shot that's pretty accurate and a shot that gets through. And he's just got pretty good IQ when it comes to identifying where he wants to put the puck and how he wants to get it to the net. And I think there's a real skill in that area when it comes to being able to score. And I mean, that's overstating the obvious, but what I mean by it is there's a knack of getting him to the right place at the right time. There's a knack of changing the release point from whether it be wide to pulling it in a little tighter and then getting it to the net quickly. There's a knack of using the eyes of the puck and shooting where the openings actually are according to what the puck sees as opposed to what your eyeball sees. So I think the really gifted scorers, I think those guys that just have the penchant for scoring throughout their career have figured out the way to do it and where to score from. And even scoring from distance is, something that I think he can do pretty well. So I always look at players and say what translates from their amateur career to their pro career. But generally scorers and guys that have scored throughout their entire lives tend to continue scoring.
Well, we need scorers in Winnipeg, so they'll be watching Chaz Lucius, no question about it.
I got to tell you the funniest line I heard, because there are some protocols in place about like how late you can actually test positive and still be able to go and get in the bubble and the whole bit. And somebody said to me, here's my thing: if a player tests positive before before the quarantine period's over, type of thing, like if they can test positive and then quarantine and then get there for the next 90 days, they'll be the healthiest person there. But I know that there are some rules in place where, depending on what day your test doesn't go the way it should go, you can't play. And I know that COVID is ravaging the NHL right now. I know it's ravaging some other pro sports, and obviously there's a spike throughout the country, and hopefully everybody out there is taking the proper precautions to not get sick. But how this affects this tournament, I'm not really sure, because I think that they're going to keep everybody so secluded from everybody that the chance of transmission will be pretty low. I think they're going to be smart. I think they're going to be masked up. I know that vaccination rates are pretty high among the teams. I know the quarantine rates have been pretty good. So I think, much like last year, this could go off pretty well. At the very least, they won't have to worry about us from NHL Network, because we will be in New Jersey doing this at a studio.
You talked about the NHL and Calgary Flames. Now, it was said today that it's easier to say they have 5 players available to play than 17 players on the COVID list. It is starting to ravage that league. The Olympics are in February. What are your thoughts?
My personal thought is, if you're an NHL player and you're thinking about going over there to play in the Olympics, you're nuts. I mean, I understand that it's a great opportunity, and the Olympic experience, trust me, I get that whole part of it. I just think for health, safety, and sanity reasons, the smartest thing you could do right now is stay home. Because here's the deal: they're going to play the Olympics in 4 years again anyway, and let's hope that this whole thing 4 years from now is really behind us. And if we're going to judge by the Spanish flu of 1919 and the fallout from there and the time period that it took and that type of thing, you would have to think that 4 years from now, we could be pretty much in the clear. And if I'm a young player approaching the Olympics, I'm thinking to myself, you know what, it's just not worth it right now. And I know that people want to go, and I know that it's important to get NHL players there to keep selling the game and building the game. But I think just from a health standpoint, especially with some of the quarantine protocols that could be in place, and heaven forbid you pop a positive test when you're there, I don't think the risk is worth the reward.
I agree completely. I don't think there's any doubt. I think the NHL tomorrow should just say it is not worth it for us to go.
Hey, listen, just send it. I'll tell you what, break up the University of North Dakota's team and split them in half and send half to the Canadian team and rest of the U.S. team. And there you go. Take some college kids, right? And send them on over.
Exactly.
He is dynamite, and replacing Ben is a tough act to follow, because Ben was a mainstay in the package for 10 years. So the package is now going to its 19th year. So he was there for more than half of it. And don't forget, like, he did 1 year with me early on before he left to go to the American Hockey League and then came back to us. So Ben and I think that 11 of the 18 seasons that the network has been doing college hockey together, and has certainly made a big impact on success that we've had as a group. And when I look back at the play-by-play guys that I've been blessed to have had at CSTV/CBS College Sports /CBS Sports Network, I mean, Steve Schlanger was terrific. He and I started out there together. Eric Freed, who's a New England-based guy, was a big part of that package for a long time. And then I had Matt McConnell, who's now doing the Arizona Coyotes and has been in the NHL for a long time, did the Atlanta Thrashers and the Penguins and the Ducks. So he was a big part of what we did. And then I got Matt Shepard, who's now doing play-by-play for the Tigers. Scott, there's your guy. Shep was with us for 2 or 3 years, and I thought he did a great job. Like, he pushed me in different ways to be a better analyst, and I give him a lot of credit for some of the success that I've had just with the way he approached the broadcast. And then we had Ben come in, and now we've got Alex coming in. Rob Carlin and Steve Cangelosi, they came in tough circumstances last year, getting kind of handed the handed the ball without a lot of preparation and a lot of time to get themselves acquiesced and ready with the NCHC. But now I get to work with Alex. You know, we did a bunch of games in the pod together. We did the NCHC playoffs last year before the Frozen Face-Off started. I think the world of him. And here's what's really important. He knows the conference. And to me, that is a big thing. And he's a real good play-by-play guy. He's a real good professional. He's an awesome guy to work with and hang around with and just kind of talk with, just a salt-of-the-earth kind of human being. And we're really excited about having him on board. But I think most importantly for the fans, he knows the conference really well. So I think when we get into this, much like Ben and the grip that he had on the conference, what I think the fans will see now is the continuation of the conversation about the conference, about the players, about the stories, about the programs, about the coaches, about the history. I think it's really important to serve your fan base with people who want to give you the information that you want to hear as a fan. And that to me is where Alex absolutely fits the bill and should slide in pretty seamlessly. And, you know, and he and Ben are good buddies. And I think that's great because I know that they've had a chance to chat. We spent a lot of time in the pod together last year. And they, you know, the support that those two have for each other is really neat. I do not know.
Well, she played at Mankato State and came out wondering what she was going to do and started a thing called the Sioux Falls Power, which was a minor hockey program that is now gigantic and has turned hundreds of players into the United States Hockey League. And then she was hired as the first female scout for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And then she had to give that job up when she was offered the job as assistant general manager of the Chicago Steel. So she's AGM of the Steel, but just a remarkable feel for hockey in South Dakota, hockey in North Dakota and Minnesota, and certainly throughout the United States. And that's just something I was going to ask you because Charisse knows the game inside and out. Women in hockey, it's growing dramatically.
Yeah, it really is. And, you know, what's really cool is when Shereen and I first met, and actually, let me backstory this because you'll love this.
Yeah.
So Shereen is my second wife, as many people know, and I was in my first marriage at the time. We were just starting at CSTV, and you know, obviously I like to do a lot of pre-prep and watch games. And we had Michigan coming up on the weekend, and I'm watching a Michigan game on Fox Sports Detroit, and she was the host in between periods, and I thought she did a really good job. And it was obvious that she wasn't just getting fed questions; like she knew what was going on here. And I called up my boss at CSTV, and I said, I know that we don't have the budget for ringside, but if we ever do, I think I got somebody for you because this would be a really good addition to our broadcast. Okay, so that was like 04-ish. And, you know, now we move ahead and, you know, my first marriage kind of fell apart. And I met her at the CCHA official symposium, that romantic setting of dealing with slashing and hooking. And so we met there and we just kind of had a conversation and we carried on a friendship. And, you know, one thing led to another in this work. But I was so blown away by how good she was on camera. And then once I got to know her better and got to understand not only how well she knew the sport, but just sports in general, I was blown away. I remember joking around about, and I was a big Blue Jays fan when I was younger, and the series that the Blue Jays blew in Detroit late in the season, and we brought up Doyle Alexander. She goes, you know, he was traded for John Smoltz. And I said, I'm hooked. Like I could have proposed right there. But like just her grip of the CCHA back then, her grip of the Red Wings, her grip of the game and the history of it, the players, was just really cool. And it's really neat to see how many women in sports are getting to that point in whatever role they're playing, whether they're coaching, whether they're in management, whether they're on air, whether they're writing. There's a place in sports for anybody. And the bottom line is, do you know what you're talking about? And do you do your homework? And are you a professional? And if you are, you know, I don't care if you're male, female, green, blue, orange, doesn't matter. If you're qualified, then you should have every opportunity to do the job.
Does he have COVID? Well, Canada. I mean, I'd be crazy to say otherwise. I'm not certain that they're the best team in the tournament. You never know before it starts. The one thing about kids playing hockey is you really have no idea who the best team's going to be. But with players like Owen Power and Cole Perfetti and Connor Bedard and Dylan Gunther, they've got some really nice hockey players on that team. Ridley Grieg, who nearly made an NHL roster this year. That's a pretty nice club, and I think they'll be the team to beat. The other team, of course, is the United States. The United States is always great in the World Junior. They run a tremendous national program, and they're always ready to play. So I look at Canada and the U.S. in the gold medal final, and if anything else happens, I'll be surprised.
Yep. It's why I think that this tournament, more than any other tournament that gets played, is must watch for American hockey fans, because you're absolutely right. It's the future of the league. It's what's coming next, and it's the trends that are coming next too. Because I guarantee you, much to John Tortorella's disdain, I guarantee you that half of that U.S. team is practicing that move that they saw Trevor Zegras pull off the other night and Sonny Milano finish. And don't forget, both of those guys are alums of the World Junior team for Team USA. And Zegras was just a man-child in last year's tournament. So I think you're going to see some interesting things get tried in this tournament. I think you're going to see the skill level of these elite players come through. But more importantly, and I've looked through the last, like we've done this tournament now, so my 14th year doing it for NHL Network. I went back over the 13 rosters, and more than half of the players that have played for the United States in the last 13 years have played games in the NHL. So you're absolutely right. This is the future of the league. Absolutely. Hey, if we play our cards right, we could all be in studio together as long as we're not under lockdown.
Me too. Me too. Merry Christmas, Dave.
You too, guys. Thanks so much for having me on, as always, and great to see the progress of your career there, Travis.